Lando Norris just about made it through the chaos to win the F1 2025 season opener in Australia, but a safety car and then some late rain made it harder than it needed to be. It was turning into a Norris-Oscar Piastri fight at the front before Max Verstappen got a sniff. But Ed, when that rain came and Norris and Piastri slid off the track, it was some quick decision making from Norris that saved his bacon.
Yeah, absolutely. It was turn 12, so that's right near the end of the lap. Basically, Norris recovered, went around turn 13 and dived into the pit lane. Now, Andrea Stella said that the drivers had been told that as soon as the rain wets the track, was the phrase he used, you come in. So they'd been primed. But I think, although you don't want to go off, they were the first to hit that particular patch of water. So he had the presence of mind, not just to focus on scrambling to get back on and cover Max. He thought, oh no, I need to be into the pits. And that was really, really important, considering this team has had moments last year when the decision-making process wasn't so sharp. I think that was really significant.
Yeah, I was about to say, how impressed were you with that? Because as we pointed out in several videos that we did last year and lots of our analysis of Norris and McLaren, they weren't always the sharpest. They were good in steady state conditions, but a little bit of chaos, like we saw today, was often their undoing. So how important was it for them to get something like this right at the first time of asking in 2025?
Yeah, it's one thing to say, oh yeah, we've learned, we know what we're doing, we've improved, but you want to test it, and it's very, very easy to become a bit insecure if you get it wrong. So important that they were just sure-footed, got it right. Okay, they lost Piastri from second place, but that was owing to the off. That could have pretty much happened to anyone.
Well, I was about to say, Piastri didn't have the chance to show the same kind of quick thinking as Norris. He only went fractionally wider than Norris over the gravel at turn 12, but it just meant that his then rejoin was much more out of control. You saw him fighting with it, trying to pull it back, and he just slid helplessly onto the grass. Obviously, that was massively unfortunate, but had his best chance of winning already been lost a little earlier in the race when a slightly unexpected team order came over the radio?
Yeah, he was closing in on Norris. He looked quicker than Norris, and actually there was a point where you're thinking, hang on, this race could go Oscar Piastri's way. And then, of course, they were told to hold position for a bit. Now, this team order, it wasn't about favouring one driver over the other. Yeah, it did favour Norris in this case, but I think this was just a McLaren team very, very keen in a sensitive part of the race not to mess it up. It was kind of a temporary freeze. And the reason for that is they were going through back markers. It was at a potential turning point in the weather. They were sort of thinking, oh, are we getting towards the end of this set of tyres? So they wanted to be a little bit careful. Piastri wasn't, I think, delighted with this, but you can understand why the team did it. Was it necessary? It wasn't essential. I can get why they did it, but it was a shame because you could see the Australian fans in the crowd were really hoping this could have been a Piastri win. And there's maybe an alternative universe in which that order is not given and Piastri takes advantage of that pace to get ahead of Norris and maybe he goes on and wins.
In that phase of the race, the McLaren was so fast on worn intermediates. Everyone else was overheating and really struggling in the final sector, and the McLarens were making mincemeat of everybody, pulling away over a second a lap. It's actually exactly the same effect, just in different circumstances, that we saw in qualifying, but they kept the tyres alive and then really made it count in the final sector. Verstappen in the Red Bull gamely held on as long as he could. He did make that small mistake that allowed Piastri to get back through into second place. Verstappen had managed to split the McLarens on the opening lap. This felt a lot like Verstappen overachieving this weekend. The Red Bull wasn't on the McLaren level. He gave it his absolute best. Do you think this is going to be sort of a sign of what Verstappen's going to have to do this year? Basically, being as much of a nuisance as he can and then fighting for every opportunity that comes his way, because there was a mistake, wasn't there, from Norris late on that opened the door to Verstappen. Well, let Verstappen put a lot of pressure on him.
Yeah, Verstappen, there was a point where you thought right at the end, oh, he could win this. He really could have done. Norris did have a little bit of floor damage, Andrea Stella said. Asked him where he got that. They weren't sure whether it was that lap 44 trip through the gravel that we've talked about, or a turn 6 moment a few laps from home that cost him some load. But yeah, Verstappen just gets what he can out of the car. The Red Bull is not quite in the game, but the team is sharp enough and Verstappen is so good that they're just going to keep on hanging in there, much as they did for a lot of last season. Yeah,
we shouldn't gloss over that Norris error. I'm not sure if it was picked up on the world feed at the time. It took us a while, certainly, to find it, but he did get away with it. He also made his own good luck earlier in the race. The reasons the McLaren went off and no one else did is because Norris and Piastri were first on the scene, and then as the rain falls, Verstappen and the others that are behind can then adjust their entry and so on. So Norris and McLaren maybe made it a little bit difficult for himself at the end. Conditions didn't help, but otherwise it was dominant. There were some other opportunism further back. George Russell obviously bagging a podium, and Kimi Antonelli for Mercedes taking advantage of the chaos to climb through to fourth. He had a pretty wild race and wild weekend. He's fascinating to watch. But it needed a sharp intervention from Mercedes to guarantee that 4th place, because he crossed the line 4th, but then been initially demoted to 5th behind Alex Albon's Williams.
Yeah, he'd passed Albon late on, and he'd also jumped up the order by stopping on that lap 44 along with Norris. Anyone who stopped on that lap, very, very good news for them. Lance Stroll, who finished 6th, was another one to benefit. But yeah, basically the team looked at it and thought, hang on, we don't think that was an unsafe release. He was released a little bit before Nico Hülkenberg was coming along, got the penalty, 5 seconds, but you've got the right of review. This is often used stupidly, but if you can say there's new and significant evidence, they produced roll hoop camera footage. There was also helicopter footage that was not available to the stewards. And they felt, the stewards, when they opened it, they said that they reviewed this. They said, look, this is new and significant evidence. Let's review it. Actually, it shows that while it looked like it was just the wrong side of the line first time round, actually we think it was just the right side of the line. So good work there from Mercedes. Ron Meadows, the sporting director, probably behind that.
Yeah, and obviously it gave Antonelli a big result on his F1 debut. He has been electric at times this weekend. Didn't quite come together in qualifying because of that floor damage. He had a spin early in this race as well. He took advantage of the opportunity that was there. Mercedes timed the stop correctly. Same cannot be said for Ferrari. A bit of a decision-making disaster class in the moment that made or completed a very disappointing Lewis Hamilton debut. They missed a chance to capitalise on the rain. They stayed out too long. Fred Vasseur admits they should have ended up pitting when Verstappen hit. But Hamilton wasn't enjoying his race up until that point anyway, was he?
Yeah, he just didn't know the car in the wet. So it was a massive learning experience. To be honest, he looked relatively content after the race. I heard from him in the pen after, and he was kind of quite sanguine and happy with the progress he'd made. The funny thing is, if there'd been a red flag when those 2 cars were off, Lawson and Bortoleto, there was a brief window where Ferrari could have started 1st and 2nd,
yes,
and Hamilton could have hung on and won his first Ferrari race. That wasn't to be. They had to make the stop later, and yeah, it was just a bit of a disaster. Hamilton disappointed the team, didn't warn him there was a second bank of rain there, because he said, well, I got through the first, it was all right, but I didn't know that was coming.
The misery and misfortune for some of the big hitters and early points contenders included the likes of Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly, who looked like they'd have been in the top 10. Didn't quite play out that way. We mentioned Albon earlier. He was running in the points all throughout, so that was richly deserved for him and Williams. You mentioned Lance Stroll as well. Aston Martin taking advantage of that. He was 6th over the line. And Nico Hülkenberg banking points in the Sauber. How does that humble pie taste?
Well, yeah, I talked down Sauber, and I would say still with good reason. They were struggling in Bahrain a lot. Brought some upgrades here, did some work on the setup, the track suited them better, and the car was credible. It was a credible midfielder. It was a Q2 car. Bortoleto got it into Q2, and Hülkenberg admitted after the race he didn't expect to be finishing 7th, but all that experience, kept it on the island. They made the right calls, which that team doesn't always do. Rewarded with a really, really good 7th place. So well done to everyone there. It's still going to be a long, hard season, but not as long and hard as it looked like it was going to be 2 weeks ago.
Absolutely. So let's have a final word for the crash victims of today. There were some experienced ones within there. Fernando Alonso, for example, he was the one that caused the safety car that preceded that McLaren moment. Carlos Sainz had a really strange one under the safety car, or when the safety car boards had come out at the end of the first lap. That seemed to be a little bit of weirdness with how the Mercedes power unit delivers the torque in the safety car mode, and I think Sainz just got caught out about it. But I just wanted to finish on how much sympathy you have for the rookies. Isaac Hadjar shunting on the formation lap, Jack Doohan shunting on the very first lap, and Bortoleto having that slightly weird one at the end. This was a really, I mean, Doohan obviously had a race start in Abu Dhabi, but this was a horrible one to wet your beak in Formula One, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Hadjar and Doohan, obviously, I mean, they're horrible mistakes. You don't want to do that, particularly Hadjar on the formation lap. It can happen. Inexperienced drivers, horrible conditions, the tyres not up to temperature. Yeah, okay, this will happen. Bortoleto was unfortunate because it appeared that he just went a little bit wide at turn 12, fired it into the wall, but there was evidence of a failure in the left rear. No, the right rear, rather. Get my left and my right the right way round. Now, was this cause or effect? It's not entirely clear. You can see it collapse properly after he spun, but he did radio in on that lap to say, check the car. So he was worried about something. So, benefit of the doubt, might not have been Bortoleto's fault.
Oh, and another person that crashed, obviously, on their first race for a new team, Liam Lawson, just compounded a really difficult first race for Red Bull Racing, first weekend with Red Bull Racing for him. And I mentioned Sainz earlier. I guess the difference between the two of them is that Sainz can go to China next week, at least hoping to bounce back a little bit more than Lawson, who looks like he's got quite a lot of work to do in the Red Bull.